Hey, if you don't care about the context or background as to why I made this video, just skip to that point there and it'll take you to the information. I hate this video. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh, because if I truly hated it, I wouldn't be showing it to you, but that doesn't mean that I like it. You see, this video was actually made as the final project for one of my classes, but I thought it would be a genius idea if I not only made it for school, but I uploaded it to YouTube as well. I could balance the comedy and information. It would be amazing. Terrible fucking idea. This has been one of the worst videos I've ever edited. There have been so many takes that I removed, changed, edited it out. So many that I made a unlisted video featuring all of them, which you can find down in the description. But I wasn't done. There is still so much I wish I could change about this video. So many scenes, so much information I wanted to change and tweak. But I can't be bothered. The class has already seen it, got a great grade, 100%. But I just don't want to deal with it anymore. I wish I could fix it for YouTube, but I don't want to look at this video. I don't want to edit this video. I am done. So here it is. The only major thing that I wish I could change is the outro, because it wasn't really made for YouTube. But like I said, I don't really want to record any more than I have to, so I hope you enjoy it anyway. I'm in a field which is unrelated to my topic, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. My project is on the Winter War, which was a short conflict between Finland and the Soviet Union during World War II. Now, I'll also be talking about the Continuation War and the Lapland War, because they are very relevant. Thank you, Tom. Now, the origins of the Winter War can actually be traced back to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, because other than just being a non-aggression treaty between the two nations, it contained the secret protocol, which was an agreement between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, which designated what independent nations fell into each country's sphere of influence. This way, if either nation decided to do that fun land occupation thingy that we call war, they wouldn't interfere with each other. It just so happened that Finland fell into the Soviet sphere of influence. In late 1939, the Soviets proposed an agreement to Finland where they would cede some eastern land to Russia, as well as some islands in the Baltic Sea, in exchange for a little bit of territory east of Finland. This way, Russia would have a larger buffer zone between their border and Leningrad in the event of a German attack. Naturally, the Finns, who were represented by this guy, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, rejected the offer. It just so happened that a few weeks later, a Soviet outpost not far from the border was suspiciously shelled. Even though Finland had zero artillery near the outpost, and the Soviets wouldn't allow any neutral investigators into Russia, and there were zero casualties. So what I'm basically saying is that it was 100% staged by the Soviets. So the Soviets declared war and invaded on the 30th of November, 1939, and they were met with heavy resistance. In fact, this is often seen as one of the greatest embarrassments by Russia in all of World War II. They eventually won the Winter War, but initially they were absolutely slaughtered by Finland at first. Which is surprising, since it was basically a war between one of the largest and strongest world powers at the time against some little snowy nation.
Throughout the war, the Finns fought ruthlessly. Similar to nations like Greece and France, they were defending their homes, and their citizens were dedicated to the war until the very end. On the front lines, soldiers traversed via skis, and you often saw them fighting in military snowsuits. They used certain guerrilla warfare tactics, and weapons like Molotov cocktails were used regularly during the war. One of the most notable Finns from the war is this guy, who has another name that I'm not going to try to pronounce, but he's better known as the White Death. And he was one of the most notorious and well-known snipers in all of World War II. He reportedly killed over 500 Russian soldiers, and he won several military awards, such as the First Class Medal of Liberty. During the initial invasion, the Soviets seriously outnumbered Finland, having roughly double the manpower. However, due to poor command and unfamiliarity with the Finnish weather and terrain, they were held back for several months, which is far longer than the Soviet commanders originally anticipated. But soon after, in February of 1940, the Soviets sent reinforcements into Finland, and they were overwhelmed and forced to surrender. On the 12th of March 1940, Finland signed the Moscow Peace Treaty, which officially ended the war and required Finland to cede the Eastern Territory to Russia. In the end, over 25,000 Finnish citizens died in the war, with a total of 70,000 casualties. Comparatively, roughly 120,000 Russians died, with a total of over 300,000 casualties. Now, my original plan was to only discuss the Winter War, but I figured I should quickly highlight two other conflicts that followed it during World War II. First, we have the Continuation War. The Continuation War began shortly after Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941. Finland's government viewed this as a perfect opportunity to form a strategic alliance with Nazi Germany so that they could take back their lost territory. Now, I'm not a political philosopher, and the point of this video isn't to discuss whether or not I think what Finland did was justified. But at the same time, they formed an alliance with the Nazis. Admittedly, it truly was a strategic alliance, as believe it or not, Jewish Finns actually fought alongside German soldiers during the war. But, you know, still, it's the Nazis. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. With the help of Germany, Finland was able to regain control of their lost territory, as well as some additional Russian territory. However, after about a year, the conflict reached a standstill. While there were certain more ambitious government leaders, their plans usually fell through, and generally Finland was not overly imperialistic, so they never really expanded beyond this point, despite Germany's desires. It's also worth noting that the United Kingdom also declared war on Finland, but it was more for appearance's sake, since the UK didn't want to defy the Anglo-Soviet agreement. The actual fighting was more organized and mechanized when compared to the Winter War. And despite the stalemate, nearly double the amount of soldiers died on each side in comparison to the Winter War. Although it's important to recognize that the Continuation War lasted for a significantly longer period of time. Eventually, as Nazi Germany began to collapse and Russia gained an advantage, Finland agreed to the Moscow Armistice on the 19th of September 1944. The conditions of the treaty required Finland to return the captured territory from the Continuation War, pay high reparations to the Soviet Union, and expel all German military troops from within Finland's borders. That last point brings us into the third and final conflict, the Lapland War. After the Moscow Armistice was signed, German soldiers very rapidly began to withdraw from Finland through the north. However, they didn't want to abandon any resources or equipment, so the evacuation lasted for a few months longer than expected. The Soviets noticed this and demanded that Finland force the remaining Germans out of their borders. Now, admittedly, neither side wanted conflict, but the Germans prioritized transporting their equipment rather than a speedy retreat. The first fighting began on the 28th of September 1944 when a small German regiment refused to surrender, thus starting the Lapland War. The fighting was made up of mostly isolated battles when certain German regiments refused to surrender. On top of that, the Germans regularly bombed and destroyed Finnish factories and military facilities. One other thing I should mention is that a large amount of the Lapland War revolved around naval conflicts. Some of them even predated the initial conflict which I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, the politics behind them were very complicated, and I don't want to bore you all to death. So all that's important to recognize is that Finland regularly blocked German shipping routes, which slowed their evacuation, but also allowed Finland to gain an advantage in the Lapland War. The war ended on the 27th of April 1945, which also finally ended Finland's involvement in World War II. The three conflicts led into Finnish fear over Soviet control throughout the rest of the 20th century. But fortunately, Finland never faced another military conflict with Russia again. So what did we learn? I guess we learned not to do it again. If you have any questions, especially about the Continuation War or the Lapland War, since I know I didn't go into as much detail with those two, please feel free to ask future me, because I genuinely do think this is a very interesting topic, and I'd love to answer any genuine questions. But that is it. Thank you all, and goodbye.